It's really wonderful to have such a great turnout for this really important piece of legislation we can get passed in Lexington for our town to begin the process of decarbonizing our buildings. One of the many steps we need to take to address climate change. Cindy, shall we get going and we'll keep admitting?
We will get going. I wanted to thank LexCan very much for offering the Zoom services tonight so that we could have a long enough meeting to be able to take questions and answers. So my name is Cindy Ahrens. I'm a town meeting member of Precinct 3. I'm also a member of the Sustainable Lexington Committee. And the objective of Article 17 is to welcome responsible redevelopment in the Hartwell corridor and reduce emissions by encouraging hybrid HVAC in new life science and lab buildings. It's a simple change that's increasingly being utilized in local life science lab projects and quickly becoming an industry best practice. Article 17 is recommended by the Sustainable Lexington Committee because it will help attract lower emission life science projects to Hartwell and support our schools with clean tax revenue. Examples of hybrid HVAC projects have modeled a 60 to 90% reduction in harmful on-site emissions while adding no more than 0.1% to the construction costs, and in some cases resulting in millions of dollars of 20-year net present cost savings. This article also provides predictability for developers with practical standards and helps avoid costly retrofitting. As you can see, we've got a lot of people that are already on board and part of the Clean Heat Lexington Alliance. The proposed change here in red adds one clause to Chapter 135, Section 7.4.4 of the zoning bylaw for the Hartwell Commercial Manufacturing, or CM district. This already contains two existing height-based zoning incentives, one of which is the current 7.4.4.2 that requires buildings over 6 stories to not use on-site combustion for HVAC, but in practice exempts life science and lab buildings because they need higher ceilings and cannot be built over 6 stories under current zoning. The new clause to be inserted before that section provides that buildings over 65 feet shall use hybrid HVAC, that is clean heat or no on-site combustion, as the first stage heating source, supplemented with on-site combustion for additional heating as needed. As a result, this addition would lower emissions from taller life science and lab buildings, which is exactly the type of development we want to bring to Hartwell. It's important to understand how these incentives work relative to the different building types and sizes. A typical 6-story office building is about 65 feet tall. A typical 6-story life science lab building, because of the special ceiling height requirements to accommodate equipment, it would be about 110 feet tall. So before the zoning changes of fall of 2020, of last year, all buildings in the CM district were limited to 65 feet, and there were no emissions reducing incentives. All buildings could use fossil fuel combustion for all heating needs. That's what's shown on the left. The zoning changes in fall 2020 included a zoning incentive, as I previously mentioned, that required buildings taller than 6 stories to not generate on-site emissions from their HVAC operations. This incentive, however, again, exempted life science and lab buildings because they can't be taller than 6 stories and still be within the maximum height, zoning height limit of 115 feet. So these taller lab buildings, because they're life science buildings, they have higher air circulation requirements, that they will create they have the potential to create even greater emissions when using 100% on-site combustion for all their heating needs. That's what we're showing in the middle. On the right here is what Article 17 proposes, an incentive that allows taller lab buildings but lowers their emissions by requiring this very practical hybrid HVAC system. Quickly about incentive zoning, this is something that's been used in Massachusetts for decades to benefit communities in a number of ways, including requiring better than code construction in exchange for more favorable limits like increased density or increased height. As an updated zero emission state building code will likely take years to go into effect, zoning incentives are an immediate and effective tool that we can use. In fact, the Attorney General's office stated in July of 2020 that towns may consider adopting incentive programs to nudge property owners in the directions of choosing systems that do not use fossil fuels. Earlier this year, the AGO approved Lexington's incentive zoning language that I referred to earlier, further demonstrating the AGO's acceptance of incentive-based building requirements for clean heat or electrification in zoning bylaws. The changes we're proposing in Article 7 merely add to that language and have been reviewed multiple times by Town Council. So a hybrid HVAC system, as defined in Article 17, is a system that does not use on-site combustion or does not burn gas. For the first stage of heating, capacity up to 5 BTUs per hour per square foot. A conventional fossil fuel combustion system, a gas boiler system, can be used for heating needs above that value. This same requirement of 5 BTUs per hour per square foot of clean heat is part of a May 2020 Easy Code proposal offered as a potential new state building code. That proposal was extensively vetted by a large number of local building engineers, by code professionals and trade organizations. We know that local developers and engineers have also shown that this 5 BTU per hour per square foot threshold is conservative. It's a doable target. As you'll see later on, there are several new lab projects going up in the area that are using clean heat for their first stage of heating from 5.7 BTUs per hour per square foot up as high as 18 BTUs per hour per square foot. In discussions with representatives of one property owner, a developer in the Hartwell area, it was stated that they could meet the first 15 BTUs per hour per square foot of heating needs with heat pumps for a potential life science project on Hartwell. Also, just recently, RMI, a global research institution, has issued a statement on a local lab. They called it partial electrification criteria, but what we're calling hybrid HVAC. And in it, they said that they support adoption of this standard in Lexington and other municipalities as a first step to limiting direct greenhouse gas emissions from new lab buildings. Why hybrid HVAC? Well, they're being built into more and more, as I mentioned before, life science buildings in our area, including these 3 projects on the right by 3 different developers, totaling over 2 million square feet of lab space. There are charts later in the appendix, also available on our website, that show that these hybrid labs meet the building's performance needs. They dramatically reduce lifetime operation costs, and they reduce the building's on-site emissions dramatically. Tenants of life science lab buildings are looking for these healthier, lower emission, and high performance buildings, and they're taking notice. Moderna, we all know who Moderna is, just leased one of these buildings, and as was noted in the Boston Globe, they did it because it was the most sustainable commercial lab building in Cambridge. So why is adding this now so important? Projections of a 3x growth, a 3x growth in the Hartwell CM district show that without implementing this incentive zoning change in Article 17, there will be a significant negative impact on Lexington's total greenhouse gas emissions. We can mitigate that emissions growth by requiring hybrid HVAC. And if property owners and tenants choose to purchase 100% renewable electricity, if you look at the chart all the way on the bar all the way on the right, we could potentially triple Hartwell's square footage and reduce its emissions compared to what it has today. We've continuing and done a lot of outreach. We've reached out to every single property owner in the CM district. We've had multiple meetings with town council, with the building commissioner and staff, planning board and staff, with the select board, Economic Development Advisory Committee. We're rescheduled for this Friday morning, Board of Health, and many others. We have hundreds of support from residents. And I want to note that the Board of Health has issued a memo saying that they support Article 17. And at the multiple meetings that we've had with the building commissioner and town council, they are comfortable, the building commissioner is comfortable with the language here in order to be able to execute and follow up with this zoning change. So, in summary, by requiring taller lab buildings to have a first stage of clean electric heat while still allowing fossil fuel heating to supplement for additional needs, Article 17 encourages better buildings for the future. It provides predictability for developers with a simple, measurable standard, with only a plus or minus 0.1% construction cost for these hybrid HVAC systems. And I want to note that in some cases, we have some of these properties in Boston have actually estimated that it will save them, that it will be a lower construction cost. This is also helping them avoid potential costly retrofitting in the future because of our net zero goals that we have. We think that Article 17 will help Hartwell adopt industry best practices for more and more Boston area lab buildings. It will promote new development. It will attract desirable tenants, a very, very key important thing. And all while reducing on-site fossil fuel emissions by 60 to 90% compared to conventional buildings. It supports the town's net zero emission goals while increasing property tax revenue and sets up us on a path for a 100% renewable future. Multiple applications have been coming in for the Hartwell CM district. So waiting for building code to improve and take effect years down the road is not the solution for Hartwell. The time to shape a better Hartwell is now. Thank you very much. So I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see everybody's lovely faces and names. And thank you again to LexCan and to everyone that showed up tonight. And we can take some questions. I will look in the chat, but maybe if Ricky or somebody else could sort of keep an eye on people raising their hands or using their reactions.
Sure. Why don't I plan to call on people as they raise their hands, or if you monitor and answer the questions.
Yeah, I'll look at the chat, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. So I see a question in the chat, and I see a hand up. Let's do the chat, and then we'll go to Charlie Moore.
Sure. Yeah, Judith asks, is there a plan for green energy for the dirty supplemental heating that will be allowed in this article? Yeah, so, well, as we know, I mean, if anybody was paying attention to what some of the bylaw that we passed in spring of this year, part of the plan, it's 3 steps, right, to get our zero emissions. We've got to electrify our buildings, electrify our cars, and then green the grid. So greening the grid is really is also an important thing. And the other thing that I'd like to say is this is not a this or that, it's a this and that. So we need to do this, and afterwards we need to, I mean, we certainly have been talking in the town and can do a lot more advocacy work with commercial developers to help them figure out how to either it would be great for them to generate renewable energy on their properties. We know that right now that probably won't be enough for them. So how can they purchase 100% renewable energy, and what's the right way to do it there? So that's something that we would, I think, as advocates, certainly look to work with property owners with. But that's something that they can do today as well.
Charlie Moore?
First of all, thank you, Cindy, for that presentation. I found it compelling. And so my question to you would be, is there anybody opposed to it? And if so, why?
Well, we've certainly heard some concerns that are raised are, well, this is going to, and this is, if anybody was, again, seeing what was happening in town meeting in the spring, there are some concerns like, well, this is going to drive away development. And we just really feel that that's not, it's not a fear that's based in solid reasoning. And a couple of things, I mean, the Moderna, quote that the fact that they're moving into a particular building in Cambridge because of what that building is doing, I think shows that the kind of tenants that you want or really want this kind of building. We also put on our website, there was an article in the New York Times recently that talked about investors in developments, property investors, are looking for this type of development. So in the past, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, investors might have been saying, well, we want to invest in something, but going green is going to cost us money. But they're really, the way they're looking at it today is they're looking at they understand the risks that climate change puts on their investments, and they're looking for investments that properties that are looking to really mitigate that and reduce their emissions. So another thing that something that I'll mention, that so in our commercial districts, or some of our commercial districts, we have these traffic management plans, and that basically says that property developers need to pay into that traffic management plan in order to pay for things that would try and alleviate the traffic that any of this new development would cause. And as an example, so there is a new development, 440 Bedford Street, that was just approved. It's going to be a life science building that is going to be, I think, about 300,000 square feet. The cost that they're paying for the traffic management plan is 3 times the cost of what we're proposing, based on public documents, based on what other all of these other buildings are saying that doing hybrid HVAC is going to cost them. So we already have something that we're putting on developers here in Lexington that costs 3 times if you take it per square foot, because some of these other developments in Boston and Cambridge are larger than perhaps the developments that might come here. But on a per square foot basis, 3 times more the cost. And we've got applications coming in. We've got developers that want to build here. So something like this is data that we have, information that we have that shows that it's not going to push them away. Lexington is on the scale of communities that are attractive for life science properties and investment for tenants. We score platinum. That's the highest you can score. That's because of, well, we're cheaper than Boston and Cambridge. A lot of other communities are. We're on 128. We're on a major route, and we have a lot of potential employees within our town. So we have a lot of things going for us. So I think that the fears that this is going to drive away development, and we think it's just unfounded. And actually, we think that this is going to be a plus, and it's going to attract really great life science tenants.
Can I do a quick follow-up question?
Sure. And if my answers are too long, I'm sorry, but you can tell I'm really excited about this and think it's really important.
If I understand, the additional costs of construction are minor, or maybe even less, and the lifetime costs are less because of the efficiency. Do people contest those 2 points? Do people who with this? Do they disagree with those 2 fundamental points?
I haven't had, I don't know, I can't think of anybody who said the data that you're pointing to on these property, on these developments that are happening, the data you pointed to is wrong in that sense. It's public data. This is analysis that, that developments are doing and presenting to places like Cambridge and Boston. I do want to note too, actually, your point about long-term costs. There's been a number of reports coming out. I don't know if any of you have natural gas in your homes, but the price of natural gas is going up. And that's not necessarily, there's certainly fluctuations, but the trajectory is going higher. And I think that, smart developers that are looking long-term should be thinking about that kind of risk as well. And I think they are.
Thank you for all your work on this. It's great.
Thanks for the great question.
And I just want to follow up to Charlie's question in that the question of what kind of negative feedback might we've gotten. It's not so much negative, but it's a question. Why don't we allow the building code to take care of this? And Cindy went over it in the presentation, but I just want to accent that again, because we just can't wait. If any of you are following what's going on with our new energy bill that Mike Barrett came out with, it's slow walking itself through the state. We have not had any of the Department of Energy Resources hasn't held any of its meetings to hear from the community on what they want for net zero. We don't know what that code's going to be. Right now, the code doesn't require it. This is an opportunity to use incentive zoning to get something that we want in the town. It's a well-recognized tool that has been given to towns to use to get something that they may want to use. So it's very important. And by the way, Mike Barrett, Senator Mike Barrett, who has championed this whole net zero energy code in the State House, has given us a quote, which will be, which is on our website, but also he's in support of this. He's made public support of this. So that's very exciting because I think they look to the local level to see what we want and where we want to go.
Yeah, there's definitely, thank you for mentioning that. I was going to talk about our, because you mentioned Senator Barrett and his support for this, and being able to lead locally. I also noticed that our rep, Michelle Socolo, is on tonight, who's also made similar type statements in her great support for our home rule petition. That we are still trying to, and she's working hard, and we are working hard to try and get that through the legislature. I see that John Royer has your hand up, but there's one. Yeah, so John, why don't you ask your question, and then there's another one in the chat that we'll get to.
Well, I had two questions. One is, are there incentives for existing buildings because there are a fair number there. I work at one in the Hartwell area now to do any of these things, to switch to 100% renewable electrical or to encourage heat pumps or solar panels. And also, are we distinguishing between air source and ground source heat pumps at all in this? And is there an opportunity for that?
Those are two great questions. Are those your two questions?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. John, thank you. Which building do you work in?
I'm on Westview, actually, behind it. So not
okay.
on Hartwell, but right behind. Yeah.
Okay. So there are, in terms of when we talk about incentive zoning, this is like the incentive to, we give you, you can build higher, but you have to build to better standards. So if you're talking about an existing building, right? Right? That's what you're talking about? Yeah. So there are there could certainly potentially be other incentives. I know that Eversource has a lot of incentives, and they have. I did attend a webinar, a forum that Eversource had. I don't know, about a month ago. And they were talking about, I think it's mostly for new construction, but it's possible that Eversource is giving incentives for existing buildings and existing structures. I'd be happy, once we get through this, I'd be happy if you want to connect me with, your building owner or something, because this is something that's really excited, and because here's the other thing, you brought up a really good point there, is that even if we tackle all of our new construction, we still have so much existing construction that we have to take care of. But what we're trying to do now is prevent, we have the technology to build things the right way now. So why would we construct anything new that would have to be retrofit in a few years, and potentially use taxpayer money to retrofit, right? So we should do it right for new construction, but we also, that it's another one of these yes and that we've got to look at existing buildings as well. And then your other question was about, are stipulating between the different types of heat pumps. You mentioned air source and ground source.
I just wonder if that's an opportunity now.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wonder if the ground source is an opportunity. I don't know enough about that to know whether it's practical, but in the beginning like this, when there's a lot of different buildings going in at the same time, is there a way to share that expense?
Certainly there is. I mean, the building that's under construction right now that Moderna has leased is using a combination actually of ground source heat pumps and what's called exhaust, well, in some cases they're calling them exhaust source heat pumps. They're also called heat pump chillers. But this is really cool technology that essentially takes the So there's energy recovery systems, so especially these life science and lab buildings, they have to move a lot of air. So as they move that heated air out of the building, they don't take the heated air, but they take the heat from that air and transfer it, so that they don't lose some of that heat. Then they slap on another heat pump on top of it to sort of supercharge the heat that they're getting out of that air. So, and that's what helps, that building get to the 15 BTUs per hour per square foot, 3 times, what this minimum requirement is. And I'll say that our hope is, of course, our hope is that we pass this, but that our hope is that once, there are a lot of developers and engineering designers, thinking this way, but once more and more of them do, and they design their buildings, they'll realize how much how smart this is for their buildings, for the future, thinking about the future, thinking about retrofits, getting this this technology that works, that's proven into these new buildings. I hope I got to all of your.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So there was one I wanted to.
There was one
go
from
back.
Jennifer
Yeah,
Richland.
Jennifer
How
Richland,
does
yes. Go ahead. Vicky.
How does this article differ from the article that was brought before a town meeting in the spring?
So I know that Jennifer is a fellow town meeting member. So what was brought forth in the spring that I brought forth as a town meeting member is I proposed an amendment to a planning board article, number 45 was the number. So I brought an amendment to Article 45 at town meeting, trying to add this one little requirement in. Now, what's changed between now and then? We've lowered the minimum requirement a little bit from 7 to 5, and that is basically based on, or one of the things based on this Easy Code proposal that was put forward that asked for 5 BTUs per hour per square foot for all buildings. It doesn't matter what kind of building you are, that's a minimum that you have to have. And the fact that was vetted by so many engineers and developers and signed on, backing the entire Easy Code. Now I'll say, like, the Easy Code that covers a lot of things, so we're taking one small piece out of that recommendation. So that's one thing that changed. We have multiple meetings, as I mentioned earlier, with the building commissioner to make sure that he's comfortable with the language and comfortable with the way that him and his team would be able to carry this out. And he has told us that he is comfortable. We have made a few little tweaks and added some clarifying language to the motion specifically for the building commissioner and his team, so that that they can feel comfortable, that they understand what's being asked. Their plan is, like many things in the building code, to sort of verify this, is in addition to sort of looking at what's being built and proposed for these buildings, they will require a certified letter or certified affidavit from the engineer of record for the project to certify that they are meeting this requirement. It's something that the building commissioner and his staff is used to doing. So that's something that's different than this spring. And really, I mean, the other thing is we've got more and more buildings. We know that more and more buildings are being built to this standard. So I guess those are a few of the things that are different between the amendment that was proposed in the spring and what we are proposing now.
I see we have Meg Landers has her hand up. Meg, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go.
Thanks.
So I'm new to this conversation. Cindy, thanks very much. I appreciate all the information and the work you've done on this. So as somebody new to this conversation, I'm curious whether or not I think you just answered the question though, that regardless of whether it's a lab building or a housing building, the application will still apply. Is that correct?
So we currently have, there's the way that the zoning works now, and this is, just to be clear, this is specifically for the Hartwell CM district, the commercial manufacturing district, or all the properties that are in that zoning district. We currently have a zoning incentive that was passed a year ago that says if you want to build a building over 6 stories, it has to be built with all with no combustion for your HVAC system, no combustion for your heating at all, no gas boilers for your heating at all. It all has to be high efficiency electric systems. If you are not building a building over 6 stories, but it's over 65 feet, then it will have to meet this requirement. So, that's regardless of what type of building it is. And I can go back to, or you can look back at the presentation. We've got some nice charts to try and show you how, a 6-story office building or residence or something like that, if it's 6 stories, it might be about 65 feet tall, but a 6-story lab building is going to be 110 feet tall or something like that. So a building that's over 6 stories, that would not likely be a lab, would have to be all electric. And if you decided for whatever reason, I can't imagine why a developer would want to build something with really, really tall ceilings every floor that wouldn't be necessary. But if they did that and it wasn't a lab, then yes, it's true. They would only have to meet, if they were not higher than 6 stories, but higher than 65 feet, they would have to meet this requirement.
And the electrical requirement, is that considered, would that fall in, we're talking heat pumps and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
for the other applications, is the electrical application for the residential or for that 65-foot building, is all electric considered sustainable? It depends on the source, but how does
Yes, so, right, so again, I'm sorry, were you finished? I don't want to cut you off.
go ahead.
Okay, as I mentioned before, there's a recipe for how we're going to solve, our emissions problems that we have. So step 1 is to electrify the buildings. Step 2, electrify all of our transportation.
Okay.
Step 3, we have to certainly make 100% renewable our electricity supply. So it's something that has to happen in concert, with our move to electrification of the buildings. But requiring 100% renewable electricity is not part of this. Is a pretty simple standard that we're proposing. But electrifying, making all of our electricity supply 100% renewable is certainly, again, a town and state, goal. But it's not part of this specific proposal.
Thank you.
Cindy, there's a question in the chat from Max. I'm sorry, I'm going to mess up your last name.
Pevsner.
Pesner.
Okay.
Okay. You see it?
Yes. How does buying green energy actually work? Will the dedicated power line from a renewable source be run to the supply side? That's not generally how it works. But the more when you buy RECs for clean electricity, especially if you're buying it, in the New England grid, you are, creating adding that additional renewable energy to the grid, which counts as making your property 100% renewable. I will admit here that I am not an expert in RECs. I mean, I do know some. Have been on the Sustainable Lexington Committee for a couple of years, but I have some colleagues that are much better versed in the grid side of things. And if you do have further questions, I will be happy to connect you to those colleagues.
Then we have a question from Marcia Jens.
And thank you so much for this incredibly informative presentation, and Cindy, for all your hard work on this. One of the things that I think is a side benefit, and I'd love to hear your comments on this, will be that buildings that aren't actually going to be that tall may also want to reach the same standards because it becomes the norm. It becomes the goal for a clean building, and that will attract tenants to achieve these standards. So thank you very much for your work.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Marcia. You know, we can't underestimate peer pressure, especially if you're competing for tenants, and what we're seeing more and more is these kinds of life science tenants really, you know, stating what their company values are and doing everything in their company, including looking at the type of properties that they're building, that their businesses are operating inside, you know, that they match those values. Their employees are demanding it of them, and it's a very, very good point. There was something else. Oh, I also wanted to mention, I see that Max also has his hand up, but I also wanted to mention, I did cover it, I think, quickly in the presentation, but another thing that we can't, underestimate, or we can't overlook, is the impact on public health. And I know that I mentioned, you know, the team presented to the Lexington Board of Health and got their support on this. But if you look at, you know, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, again, RMI, so many of these institutions are really recognizing that we have to tie emissions not only to overall, you know, sort of keeping the overall temperature of the earth down, reducing our emissions, but there's a huge public health factor. And we you know, even with this little, as Charlie mentioned, you know, this slight, you know, perhaps increase in the cost, we've got to be looking at the cost, the public health costs that all of the emissions are going to cause, and we've got to sort of take. I think that we all together, as residents of the town, but as commercial property owners in the town, tenants, you know, companies operating in the town, we should all have these values and be concerned for everyone's public health. I just wanted to sort of add that in there. I'm not sure. Oh, thank you. Mark Sandine is answering a lot of questions. I know. Thank you, Mark, for being here tonight. He does have a lot of background too in terms of purchasing renewable electricity and how that works. So Max, I think, had his hand up at some point, but I don't think he does anymore. But you know, Mark Sandine is definitely a good resource for that. Oh yes, the community choice program. So sorry, thanks Mark. We have a Lexington community choice program, which basically the town sort of as a group goes and negotiates really good renewable, like 100% renewable electricity prices for the entire town. That program is also open for Lexington businesses to use. So that's one avenue that they can go to get 100% renewable electricity for their electricity use. Just looking to see, is anybody else have their hand up?
Charlie.
Oh, Charlie.
Moore. Yeah.
Charlie gets to go again because no one else has their hand up now.
All right. Cindy, this makes so much sense. Why restrict it to Hartwell Avenue? Why not apply it across the town?
Well, Hartwell Avenue is, so again, you know, I talked about in the presentation a bit, we're using the tools that are available to us, right? So one tool that is available to us is using this incentive zoning. So we're allowing taller buildings to be built. The town has been very clear about wanting to attract more commercial development, and allowing them to build larger buildings is a part of that. And it's important. We want, you know, to to revitalize, sort of some of that commercial activity, to bring in more commercial property taxes for our town. But we can do that in a way that's also responsible. And so what we've done, the reason why we're focusing on Hartwell right now is because that is the district where we have allowed these taller buildings to be built, and this is a new thing, just in the last year. So and that's where the application, some of the applications are coming in, and we want to develop a happening there. So that's why we're focusing there right now. I know that the planning board, or I think that the planning board in the spring is looking at expanding these increased building heights to some other commercial areas. I think down in the Hayden Avenue and Spring Street area, which could be good. And so if those I would say that if those areas are their building heights are increased there, that we should put these same incentive zoning bylaws in that area as well. And I guess one other thing that I want to be clear, that this is one tool that we have available to us aside from asking for a home rule petition, which we have already, but it's not through the legislature yet. So we are asking, with the help of our representatives, to ask the state legislature to let us reduce emissions in new construction. But until that home rule passes, we can't enforce that. And so we can enforce it. The AGO has told us, Harvard Law, our town council have all said that, using incentive zoning, so allowing some additional height or some additional density in return for a requirement that could lower emissions is something that we can do. But so we have to do it either by a home rule, which we haven't passed yet, so we can't do anything. We're working on that. And we hope that passes through the legislature, but using incentive zoning, allowing increased height, increased density in return for some more responsible buildings that will lower our overall emissions, is something that we can do now. I hope that helped.
I see Max has his hand up again. Cindy, want to call?
Yeah, Max, do you want to? Do you want to speak, Max?
Yes, I do.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm just trying to understand how it actually works, because I'm not a big fan of voting for measures or taking steps I don't understand. I'm an engineer by trade, and there's a certain amount of discipline we have in our field when it comes to decision making. And I completely, I'll be very honest with you, I completely don't understand how, in the absence of physical changes to the grid, anything that buying this green energy actually moves the needle or changes anything. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying I don't understand the mechanism by which it happens, and I am not very comfortable voting for something that I don't understand how it works.
So I'll just be clear that this article that we're proposing, it has nothing to do with the purchasing of green energy, but it's something I'm referencing it because it's part of, recognized by the state and the town of Lexington and a number of other municipalities, is that that's part of the steps to a zero emissions future. So it's not part of Article 17, and perhaps there's a lot of people giving answers in the chat. So maybe perhaps that's a discussion that is better had online. I hate to not answer people's questions, but it's not specific to the article. So does that help, Max?
Max, if you check the chat, I think Joe
Yes.
has, yeah. And as I said, some of these, if it's not pertinent to Article 17, of course, we want to try to answer your question as best as we can. But we're also collecting ideas for future events that we might want to hold that gets everybody up to speed on the knowledge. It's something we all need to be thinking about and working towards. So better education is also part of the, but as Cindy said, it's not part of Article 17. So voting for Article 17 will not require that our energy comes from greener resources. Of course, we want them to, and we will educate them to look at that and to understand that process. Maybe we all need to extend ourselves and get a little better educated.
That's actually, that sounds like a great idea, Ricky. I think, and it sounds like there's people who are very interested in it. So I think that's a great plan to cover in the future.
There's a question from Fran Ludwig in the chat. What role does the planning board have in promoting Article 17?
What role does the planning board have in promoting Article 17?
Maybe, maybe not so much promoting as in terms of saying yes, but as why we're having a hearing with the planning board. Why are they so involved? So Cindy.
Well, any zoning change is required to have a hearing. And so whether it's a zoning change that's brought by town staff or the planning board or a citizen, and even the zoning changes that I mentioned that were passed last year that increased the building height and included some incentives for buildings over some clean heat incentives for building over 6 stories, was also a citizen's petition, and also had to have a planning board hearing to cover it. So it's just because it's a zoning bylaw change proposal, it has to have a planning board hearing. But of course, the planning board should say what they think about it, should hear about it, and be able to ask questions and say what we think about it. I see that there is at least one member of the planning board here tonight, and I appreciate that. If there's any questions we can answer tonight, but again, we will be having the hearing at tomorrow night. It will be a full planning board meeting, so they will also be covering other things that are coming up in front of the planning board. So I guess, I don't know, Fran, if you wanted to expand more on that, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think I was just wondering, I know you have to sort of vet this with various town boards and hope for their support in town meeting. And is that why, well, you explained, I think, that if it has to do with zoning.
Yes, it's required to have a planning board hearing.
Okay.
I mean, but even if that wasn't a requirement, certainly we would bring, as we brought it to, we are going to be bringing it to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. We brought it to the Board of Health. The select board. I mean, the select board has to talk about it and have an opportunity to ask questions, which happened back on October 25th. Any of those relevant, town boards or committees, we should be, seeing what they have to say about it. So thank you. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Ricky popped in the link to the planning board hearing tomorrow. I think we are first on the agenda. Planning board hearings can be very long, and we're very thankful for the board to sign up to many long hours and meetings of important work. But we are first on the agenda. So if you do also want to come tomorrow night to hear firsthand, how the planning board feels, or how perhaps other members of the community feel, you are quite welcome to come tomorrow night. I'll also let you know, like, the way hearings usually work, or the way the planning board meeting works is, I'll give the presentation. I'll give the same presentation I gave tonight. The planning board will have their comments and questions. And then there will be a public, if you've attended a select board meeting, there will be a public comment period. So you can raise your hand and make whatever comments that you'd like to make. But that will be tomorrow night at 7.
Yeah, Judith Glickson asked the question, if we speak at the planning board, what are the most critical points to address? I'm going to give this a quick shot myself and then hand it over to Cindy. If you support the article, I think the most, however you feel about the article, it's important to let the planning board know how you feel. And you probably have a why. Everybody has the thing that grabs them about a particular article. What is it that you want, the result you want to see from the article? If the result is you want fewer emissions, you want to cut our emissions, then that may be the point you want to make. If you want developers who are willing to take sustainability to heart and really put it up on the top of their list of what kind of building they want, I think speaking from the heart is always great. And Judith, I know you know how to speak from the heart. So I think it's, and also if anybody in the audience who is thinking, if you know any developers or you work in buildings, as has been brought up before, that you either look to your whoever's you're getting where you work, and you want these kinds of things where you work. That's what we want for all of the people who are going to be working on Hartwell: a cleaner, healthier building that has resiliency, who isn't going to be turned upside down the road when we have to. Everybody's going to have to retrofit. And Cindy, anything else to add?
Well, you just made me think of something that somebody said, in terms of, I know Charlie asked in the past about, who or what are some of the reasons that people say that are against this, that, oh, this is going to drive away developers or drive away, development. And I gave the reasons I gave before, like all the reasons why we think this is really important, should actually be a plus and attract developers. I would also like to add that somebody, it wasn't me that coined this term, but why would we want to build, sort of dinosaur buildings? Like why would we want, and why would, tenants want to move into a building that they know in, in a very short time, in a very few years, if our Senator Barrett, if that climate legislation actually, comes through, and we have these goals for ourselves in the entire state, we are going to have to reduce our emissions. So why would you be looking long term to move into a building that's going to have a costly retrofit, or it's going to be a dinosaur in that sense. But I think about everything else that you said, to do this point, you should speak from the heart. And if you do want to say something, I mean, the planning board, just like the select board, and your town meeting members, for those of you who aren't town meeting members, if you feel strongly about this, you should tell them what you think about it.
Yeah, actually, just to mention, we still want to take your questions if you have any more questions. We're just going to go over a few points very quickly on how to sort of advocate in Lexington, how to be a citizen advocate for the things that you think are important for our town. So just a very few brief things. Mostly we'll be giving you a link where you could get this information. This is true for whether it's Article 17 or some other article that's going to come up in the future. So it's kind of just a little hands-on learning on how to advocate for the things you want from Lexington. So once we finish with questions here, I'll just flip to that script.
Well, it was certainly a good segue, I guess. Yeah, perhaps. I mean, we're coming up with 3 minutes left. Certainly, take your time if you still want to come up with a question. But if you want to go and show what you had, Ricky. I think
Sure.
that's fine.
So this is just some quick information, and Fran, I think you're in the audience. If you could put the link to this document, we're sharing this document publicly, share it with everybody you know. Really, town meeting is a representative body, and I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 2, Cindy's a town meeting member in Precinct 3. So we do want to hear what you think. So there are ways to advocate. So I'm going to first go over Article 17 and then maybe go a little bit backwards in general, because Article 17 is happening right now. So these, the Clean Heat website gives you lots of information regarding this article, and where you can get a lot more details. So if you're still stuck on a couple of questions, you might find your answer there. If not, there's an email address you can write to that Cindy gets that email, and she will answer your questions. It's good to tell the select board how you feel, because they all vote on this. And I will say, since I was at the select board meeting on Monday night, at this point, I think we have, is it 4 town select board members, Cindy, or is
As of Monday night, yeah.
4 select board
Four,
members?
four that said they were in support, and 1 await for, I think, the planning board hearing tomorrow.
Right, so if you click on this select board, it's going to take you to a general, I'll just show you where it goes. It allows you to send a comment, your name, your email, and your question and comment, and it will go to all the select board members. Same with town meeting members. You might like to send to, find out your precinct and send an email to all of your town meeting members, or send them to, if you know somebody who's on town meeting in your precinct, send them an individual email. The planning board, you can send them an email that you support this. And then again, I put this in the chat, but if you support this, you might want to sign up online, where we have quite a healthy number of supporters. I just will quickly share that list because it's impressive, I think. So just so you know where many of your other your neighbors, how they feel about this. And you can also submit public comment to town meeting. That will be if you're not a town meeting member. So in that case, you write about a 2-minute or less comment, and you submit it, and then Sean Dugan, who's our information officer, it will be read at town meeting. So that's a great way to get involved.
And I just say, hot off the press, even that the list of supporters that you quickly showed, Ricky, I just looked, and we got 2 more just this evening. Signed up just since before the meeting. So
great, thank you. It's good to get hot off the press. So the planning board meeting is tomorrow night, and we welcome people to go and say how they feel about it. It does not have to be long. While you have up to 2 minutes, everybody appreciates a 15 to 30-second comment that you support this, you think it's important for our town. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Or maybe there's one part of this presentation that really hit you, that this is why we need to do this now. So just back to all warrant articles. I really encourage people in town to sign up to get notifications about meetings going on in town. Just because what happens when you get the notification that there's a meeting, you can get it from the select board, the planning board, economic development, a number of resources. You can check their agenda, and maybe there's something on the agenda that is really important to you, to attend that meeting and to follow that. And then during town meeting, if you click on this link, then you're going to see every article that's on town meeting. And it showed, like, we'll go to Article 17. Here's the article, the motion, the slides that Cindy just showed, and the video of the presentation. Is that updated yet, Cindy?
The video was, I gotta check it. I think the slides might be as well. There was a glitch with our wonderful town staff, but there was a glitch that the motion got updated, but the presentation's still not updated yet.
Okay.
So that's why
And
I also recommend going to the Clean Heat website, because that's got the latest of everything.
And the other thing is LexCan, who's hosting tonight, has an advocacy committee. Fran Ludwig, who spoke earlier, she is the chair. This is the statement of what we believe. The advocacy committee aspires to be a vehicle for educating voters about climate issues at the local, state, and federal level, creating voters who are informed and confident and urging action. So if you're interested in advocacy, it may be about pollinators, it might be on decarbonization, it could be there's many issues that come under the umbrella of addressing climate change. We are forming groups that are following this legislation, and sometimes we need to advocate on the state level and sometimes on the local level. Local level, twice a year, mostly. And there's resources here for you to contact the person who's chair. And the other, so I assume this was shared in the chat? That link? Okay,
It
great.
was, but I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna send it again.
Okay. The other thing I'd like to say for anybody who's on this call who is not a town meeting member, run for office. Really, that is the way to make a difference. It is a time commitment a couple of times a year, but it's very interesting. It's very rewarding, and we always need more voices who care about our environment and the climate and want to make a difference. And this is one way to do it. So there are many boards and committees. You don't even have to run for office. You could be on a board or a committee. There are lots of opportunities in Lexington to get involved. And I encourage people to think about that. So I see that Max still has his hands up. So I don't know if that was another question. And I'm sorry if we've been ignoring that or whether that's left over. Okay, I'm going to go with leftover. Please, if you have, again, write the Clean Heat email at the Clean Heat website. If you have any specific questions, I don't see any hands up, so I guess we're done with questions. And again, LexCan is always looking for more people to come to our monthly events like this one. And you can put your email in the chat or write info. Here, let me just type it in here. info@lexcan.org will get your email to us, and we'll sign you up for anything or any information you want to know. So I think, Cindy, that seems like it. Yes?
Yes, that was fun.
Yes, it was.
I was really, I'm really happy. And, in this time, I'm always happy to see people that I know that we don't get to see too often. Although I did get to see, you guys should have seen me on Rediscovery Day. I was like jumping up and down every time I saw somebody that I knew that I could, talk to them in person. But it's still nice to see people or see your names, to know that you're listening online. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you all for coming. And for your town meeting members, we'll see you at town meeting, and others, we'll see you as we continue this together. Thank you.
Yes.